Welcome back to the Daily Dope Show. I'm Brando, the Weed Commando, your friendly host. And I love everyone, so, this is also, like, since haven't been around in a while, I was going to quick minute to say hi. No hard feelings about anything. But anyway, let's just get right to this. This is insanity. And coming from me, I'm freaking out because this is just not America, right? We've been seeing a lot of things lately that's like, whoa, dude, are you serious? Like, and then, all this other stuff going on with cannabis legalization. It's not really, like, I haven't really felt like I missed too many opportunities to do stories because nothing's really happened since the last story I did. That significance, and it's for the same reasons I've been saying all along, is that the government doesn't work for you. The Democrats they're not really trying to make these changes that they always promise you, and the Republicans are definitely always on the side of prohibition. So don't expect things to happen too fast, guys. The corporate takeover wants the slow rollout, and meanwhile, the government itself is looking for a new thing to focus its prohibition efforts on. And this is what happened when alcohol prohibition started to come to an end. They were scrambling around looking for something, and then after alcohol prohibition actually ended, that's when they ushered in the cannabis prohibition. And now this is the same thing happening here, only with prescription medications. And now I know they're going to tell you that there's justifiable reasons to do what they're talking about here, but there's not. This is just absolute insanity. This is the Fourth Amendment disappearing right before your eyes. So I'm not going to read a bunch of text, which I do have all highlighted, because it's all really important, and I highly recommend people look into this further. But what I really want you to do is please go make some comments on the public comment for this, which you probably didn't even know about, if I'm guessing right, even though this was in fact in the New York Times. Right here is the article, and I might browse through that, but we're going to just go ahead and look at this one real quick. For the first time, a U.S. panel recommends screening adults for illicit drug use. First of all, what is this panel? And that's why I'm not going to read this, because I got it all pulled right up here. The panel is the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force. Preventative services is so important. They have a freaking task force on job. And where'd this task force come from? Make a long story short, the Affordable Care Act, which was a right-wing healthcare plan passed by Obama, for whatever reason, it is absolutely chock full of right-wing, crazy authoritarian bullshit. One of them that everybody remembers is the individual mandate, which is a Heritage Foundation think tank, which is a right-wing group. It's their plan to, make it so every person has to be responsible for their own health care somehow, like, that's what universal health care means to them. Oh yeah, everybody is covered, but because we put a gun to their head and say, you have to go down the road and buy an insurance policy. And for you libertarians out there, that's what it is. When libertarians say, oh, Medicare for all is the government putting a gun to my head saying I have to pay extra taxes so the guy next door gets his insulin shots. Yeah, that is what it is. That's exactly what it is. But that same gun is right now being held to your head to go pay these middleman insurance companies to rip you off and not even give you coverage. And also doctors are basically hamstrung to forcibly do whatever they are allowed only to do. So if someone wants to get a procedure, but guess what, it's not covered, the doctor can't just do the procedure. The doctor simply just says next, and the person with the money or the insurance gets the procedure. Anyway, I'm not going to get into a big debate about which Medicare plan is the best one for America, but I can tell you right now, the one that we have in place right now is not working. And Obamacare has been dismantled in every reasonable sense of the word. Like, anything that Obamacare did that was good has been dismantled. It's gone. Like, pre-existing conditions, perfect example. Now insurance companies have the ability to say no to you for even getting an insurance plan. So, I mean, that's just insanity. But meanwhile, this still exists. This U.S. Preventive Services Task Force. You might be thinking, well, maybe they're on the job doing some really good things and talking about how do we prevent things. Obviously not. Because if you want to prevent cancer, I can think of one thing that you could be doing every day that could help you a lot towards that. So anyway, these guys are set up to do this crazy thing, but what they really are doing here is a public comment for something, and I believe this expires on September 9th. So I'm trying to get this out there so people can actually go here and do this. And they're not even they're being transparent about why they have this comment here. It's an opportunity, and it's in an effort to make the U.S. Preventive Service Task Force recommendations clearer and its processes more transparent. The task force started posting draft recommendation statements online for public comment in 2009. To further enhance its work, the task force began inviting public comment on all its draft research plans on December 2011, and its draft evidence reviews in March of 2013. So, yeah, basically they're saying, well, we got to do this, or later on you're going to say we didn't, and we just snuck a bunch of this crazy authoritarian shit in on you. But really what I'm telling you is that that's still what they're doing. Unless they basically send a letter to everybody in the mail in the whole country, which everybody, last time I checked, unless you're homeless, which is 500,000 people in this country somehow, you could actually go send a mailer out to everybody in this country, minus 500,000 people that might not have an address, and they would know that there's public comments for this. And we'd be like, you know what, cool, I can thumbs up or down this shit, right? Just ask for that. Because I guarantee you that nobody wants this. Absolutely nobody wants this. These guys are just, it's all fun and games when they say that they're just asking for public opinions about, should we make people, take a drug test or not. That's what they're saying. And they're being nice about it. Like, oh, it's going to be your doctor. And they're just, this isn't like something where they're going to just immediately arrest you if they find out you just shot heroin on the way to the drug test. It's, it's friendly. It's nice. It's medical procedure stuff. These people here, they're the Preventive Services Task Force. What does that even mean? Guys, this is like the most Orwellian shit I've ever seen. And in this opioid epidemic that they keep talking about. Now, the opioid epidemic, I'm coming around full circle to thinking that the whole thing is just way overblown. It's a fentanyl overdose epidemic. The more you look into it, it's got very little to do with prescription opioids. Sure, a lot of people are on prescription opioids. Sure, they've been overprescribing people for decades, if not forever, since opioids were invented. But the thing about it is that why there's 70,000 people dying of overdoses every year? No, it's because of these fentanyl situations. Whether you want to say it's the fentanyl that's being prescribed or street fentanyl or laced, whatever, all of it. There's just way too much fentanyl out there. I'll agree with that one. That's a talking point that I've made many times. I think the shit should be, if you're going to outright ban stuff, that would be the one. Or anything with that molecule, This is absolutely unnecessary. Oh, but it's safer because you can take in super small doses and you don't need a bunch of cut and side effect shit and all this blah, blah, blah. Yeah, sure. All right, cool. But the government, the media, everybody's already telling us we're not responsible enough to have those kind of drugs out on the street, obviously. You know how I know that? Because you're asking to piss test everybody in the country. That's just absurd. How do they justify this anyway? Here it is right here. And the New York Times is always my go-to place when I want to find out what the CIA wants people to know, the propaganda. That's always my go-to, place. Or if not them, then the Washington Post or CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or whatever. They're all, getting, if you don't think they're bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry, the big oil, all the people that are killing everything and addicting everybody to everything, that's all you got to do is wait for a commercial break. That's all they have is money flowing in from that shit. Meanwhile, they're telling you that they want everybody to piss in a cup. Wow. Tell me that's not a windfall. And I've mentioned this before. I said it was very possible that this could happen when I did a video about this secret meeting that a bunch of drug warriors from the 80s had, and it was basically just a Jeff Sessions worship session, and everybody acting like they brought in some of the most scariest monsters they resurrected out of the dungeons of hell to come to this meeting. And one of them was a guy that ran some kind of a Boys Town kind of place for people that got caught with drugs when they were in high school. And you get shipped off to this place. And it was a hellhole, of course. And of course, they got busted because the staff or somehow people were molesting the kids. And of course, this guy, instead of getting thrown in prison, because he was head of the facility at the time, he got, elevated to higher positions in government. Because that's what they do. They reward these people, either government or lobbies or the actual corporations that they work in and around. And in this case, it would be some kind of rehab stuff. And that kind of rehab stuff has been watered down to the point where it still exists heavily. And they try to stick kids in there all the time for weed. And that's why you're hearing more and more of this. They're part of this thing where they're like, ooh, man, our windfall is starting to our sales are they're not moving. We need more wind in them. And this is one way I guess they can see how they can do it. And this is like the opioid crisis is the gift that keeps on giving all these corrupt entities around the government, which keeps doing these more and more authoritarian things. And I mean, you don't even got to have anybody in your family on prescription pain medication to know that what they've been doing in the last 5 years is already an abomination. The government is literally your doctor now. Yeah, anybody feel like that? Like you can't go to your doctor and have an honest conversation anymore. They're afraid they're going to go to the clink if they give you your opioids that you wanted, that you've been getting for 20 years. Now, I don't really have any personal experience myself with this, but my parents, my partner's parents, everybody I know that's on opioids for pain, and I'm not talking about people that are just having a good old time with, a quack doctor and getting their fun on. I'm talking about people with legitimate chronic pain that's not going anywhere. The pain isn't going to change, and the fact that they can't get their opioids has turned them into even more of a wreck. In some cases it's really bad. In other cases, people have finally broken I live in Michigan, so marijuana is everywhere. It's not illegal anymore, so people actually have been gravitating towards weed, and that's a good thing. Back to this, let me really quickly, I don't think I should really go too much farther on this, but, here, let me just throw you some of these justifications they're going to ease in with this propaganda piece. 1 in 10 Americans say they misuse drugs. Doctors should ask everyone about both illegal and prescription use, the Preventive Task Force said. Now, from what I understand, they're saying, the doctors are just going to ask. It's a screening process. They screen you, and then maybe they don't trust you, so then they got to make you pee in a cup or something. Screening starts with just talking to you. Now, this is my argument with this, is if everybody had actual regular doctors that they go to, then you should be honest and upfront with your doctor and not worry about what he's going to say or he's going to report it to the feds. So this is just another way that the patient-doctor relationship is being affected heavily by the government intervening in the prescription process by, I guess, no other word than intimidating you with this line of questioning and possible piss test later. It's ridiculous. Now, the thing about it is the group's guidelines are not binding on doctors but carry weight. A provision in the Affordable Care Act says that services recommended by the task force must be covered by insurance with minimal or no copayment. And doctors can get in trouble if they don't comply with that, The panel's call for increased scrutiny by primary care doctors is an effort to show or slow the deadly use of opioids, including street fentanyl and heroin, as well as prescription painkillers, perhaps the worst public health crisis in a generation. So they kind of convoluted that so you don't really know what they're talking about, but it's the fentanyl. I mean, the heroin too. The heroin. See, the weird thing about this is the heroin and fentanyl numbers kind of move around depending on how good of access people have to prescription medication in the area. And Florida is the best example I can think of to illustrate this point. Florida had the pill mills, and it was just insane. And then Pam Bondi came in there, and she cleaned it up. But what happened was after the cleanup of all the opioids, and you seen the OxyContin epidemic kind of slow down, and the fentanyl was kind of on the decline. Then all of a sudden, boom! Here comes the heroin, and the heroin numbers shot through the roof. So none of this stuff really addresses the root cause of addiction or why people really are turning to drugs, and none of that. If you talked about that, wouldn't even cover why people are dying from fentanyl. Because a lot of times people dying from fentanyl aren't people that are been, addicted to heroin for any period of time. Guys, I've been way too long on this video as it is. And this is insane. But the guidelines, which are open for public comment through September 9, carry significant challenges for implementation. Most doctors have no training in how to elicit honest answers from patients about such stigmatizing behavior. And that's another huge problem. There's already this tension between doctors and patients that existed before. That existed before this heat has been brought on because of this quote-unquote opioid epidemic. And I don't know why this is not scrolling good, sorry. So, one of the things I seen, and I think it was actually in this article, but so while the task force did not recommend screening teenagers aged 12 to 17, it did not advise against such a step either. So I think that, again, it's really getting hard to make the case to throw kids in juvenile detention centers or even rehabilitation centers for smoking marijuana these days. But if they get the full backing of this preventative task force, the Preventive Services Task Force, maybe. I mean, they like everything that they try to sell with this propaganda, they always have these hypothetical situations. If a kid walks in with inattention, is that ADHD or marijuana or nicotine use, says Dr. Levy, who directs a program on adolescent substance use and addiction at Boston's Children's Hospital. Quote, even if we could never get those screenings to work as interventions, that information is critical when we decide how to treat kids. But there is so much fear and shame around substance use disorders. The way doctors frame their screening questions will have an impact on a patient's response, the doctor said. And that's a no-brainer. That's why I say they're going to usher this in. This is like incrementalism. You always hear about incrementalism. Oh, we can't have Medicare for all right now, but we can do a public option and maybe slowly work it in over a period of 50 years. And that's what a centrist will tell you about any issue. Oh, we can't end all the wars and bring all the troops home from 1,000 military bases around the world. That would be weak. We got to do it slow. And sometimes they talk about intervention and it has this slow arc towards good things in the future. That's usually what it is. That's how politicians get reelected, right? This doesn't have that. This has the slow arch into total authoritarian fascism, where, like I've been saying all throughout the article, there's already this tension between doctors and patients when it comes to this pain management because of the opioid epidemic that they keep amplifying like that's the most important thing in the world. When, no matter what you think about the opioid epidemic, and I know dozens of people throughout my life that have died from opioids. So I'm not taking this lightly when I say 70,000 people a year isn't really that much on the grand scale of things, but we got to do things differently, no doubt. But when you're talking about taking the whole collective and telling them, you know what, we don't trust you anymore. We need to find out what kind of drugs you're on, and we're going to make your doctor get to the bottom of this. It's going to start with a question or two, but it never ends there. This doesn't end there. This arc off into the distance doesn't look like the distance is that far, and the arc leads to total fascism. Did I mutter words or stumble or stutter? Do you get what this is, guys? This is insanity. This is the biggest overreach attempt that the government has ever done to the United States citizenry. And if you don't think that that's the case, name another one. And this is only if this does go to that extreme, but how can it not? Now there's a huge problem that I see with this right away. That is a no-brainer, I guess, in their eyes, because they always say, oh, the people that don't have jobs and they don't have people. There's 30 million that we know of people that don't have health care. So that means, you know what that means? They don't have a doctor. There's like 30 to 40,000 people a year that die because they don't go in for regular checkups. And then when they feel a pain in their stomach or some shit, they go in, and you're stage 4, you're going to die in 3 weeks. That's like 40,000 people a year. So all those people, 30 million people in this country, that's a lot. And like I said, 40,000 people dying just because they don't have a doctor. You think, 72,000 people died last year because of opioid overdoses or something, some overdose. Oh, really? Wow, that's interesting. How come the Preventive Task Force don't give a fuck about the 40,000 people that you could have prevented dying simply by providing them with a fucking doctor on a regular basis? Huh? What about them? Don't seem to care about them. But all of a sudden, this opioids, it's killing people. Let's make them go piss in. Everybody's got to piss in a cup. We don't want these people to keep dying every year. Let me just again say that my position in life has always been that drugs are not the government's concern. Period. End of story. Whether it be the drugs that make you get better from illnesses, whether it be the drugs that you do to have recreational fun, that's just not the government's business. That's doctors and patients' business. That's it. And what we have here is authoritarianism seeping its way, poking its head in, and fascism right behind it. So I urge people The link will be in the description. Go comment on this, please. And it's hard to imagine that there's going to be very many, because they did a really good job of burying this story. You know, this New York Times piece is probably the biggest. Wow, I guess I had the Google page open, but I closed it where I did the search, and it's still pretty scant. Like, it doesn't even fill up the whole first page of a Google search, the amount of articles there is about it. And as far as mainstream media, which most people don't even know about it unless it's plastered on every mainstream media source. So if you only have one, the New York Times, that's a pretty obscure source, to be honest, these days. You have to be on like CNN, the nightly news with whoever does that on like the TV you can churn on even if you don't have cable. Like all that. It has to be all of that. USA Today, CNN, MSN, all the whatever. I don't watch any of that crap, or I've never even considered picking up a New York Times for any reason, like in physical format. But here it is. They're the biggest source I could find from it. And then there's this one here, Stat News. And they raised some pretty good points. But this is the biggest one. I'll leave you with this. The panel means by screening, they mean the physician asking a patient a series of questions. The answers can indicate who might need to be offered or referred support. It does not include drug testing. Screening tools are not meant to diagnose drug dependence, abuse, addiction, or use disorders, the members of the task force wrote in their report. That's all great. However, when you say the next sentence, quote, we have a pretty high prevalence of adults using illicit drugs and we're seeing harms every day from that. And then you hear me earlier talking about how in the New York Times piece they were saying, you know, look at the picture. They're like, oh, you know, it's hard to know what questions you ask the patient if you want them to be honest about their illicit drug use. Oh, you know what? And it's even harder when they know that the government is doing this task force because they want to know who's doing what. So it's a slippery slope at best, but to me it's more obvious that right when the authoritarians get their foot in the door with, hey, we're just asking questions and want to know what's going on here, as soon as that foot's in the door, boom, here comes the fascism with, yeah, there's going to be screening. Like, if you want to get this procedure, you're going to have to get screened. That happens already, you know? So people that don't have doctors and to ask them those questions, well, you know, then they feel that pain in their stomach I was talking about earlier. So they go to the emergency room. They're like, oh, wow, looks like you have cancer. But it's only in stage 1. We can actually, you know, we can easily cure this. We can get rid of this problem for you. But you got to take a piss test, man. You got to be forthcoming with us about your drug use. And, oh, what? You use opioids and you don't have a prescription? And who knows where you go from there, because currently they're still trying to prop up this rehab industry that I've been complaining about most of my life. But that's what they're trying to do. This is insane. I didn't mean to make this video go so long, but I'll leave you with it. Please go comment. Links in the description. Link to the articles in the description. Daily Dope Show signing off once again. I will be back. Don't worry, guys. This shit's just, I mean, there's just always stuff like this popping up. And maybe somebody else will legalize weed that matters. Who knows? We'll see. All right. Peace. Peace.